HR 3027. And what was your response? Yes. All right. Woohoo!
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
18-year-old young woman in high school. He told her to bend over a chair with her buttocks raised. The petite, barely 5 feet tall, attractive 18-year-old woman refused. The unusually large, strong young man, he was well over 6 feet, well over 250 pounds, physically forced her to assume the position and summoned 2 assistants to hold her down as she struggled to resist.
Here with Paula Flo, this is a message she's trying to get to stop corporal punishment in this country, which is destroying the lives of our children abusively. And she's here from Hawaii?
Yes.
And tell us something about what your goal is while you're here.
Okay, well, as you said, there are 19 U.S. states where teachers are still allowed to take this wooden board. You hear that? That's what they're using to strike American school children on their buttocks with. If I were to go and try to enter the building standing behind myself, I would be arrested if I insisted on going in, because this is deemed by this court here a deadly weapon. And also corporal punishment is deemed cruel and unusual punishment. And on page 52 of the Umbrella of Powers, it says, except for school children. And that's written by Professor of Law in Harvard, Noam Chomsky, in a book called The Umbrella of Powers. So why are we allowing a teacher tool in American schools where 3-year-olds right on through senior year in high school can be struck with the very object that if I try to walk into this building, I can be arrested.
With wooden sticks or otherwise, and the Supreme Court judges are right to be protected from that. But if the Supreme Court judges are protected by the Capitol Police, then I think the kids should be protected at school.
Can you imagine being hit with a stick that's almost 3/4 of an inch thick, solid wood, about 5 inches wide, and about almost 2 feet, being hit on your buttocks with this? Can you imagine that? That's what he did to this 18-year-old girl. He struck her buttocks, legs, and her hip with a 4-foot-long piece of wood. She momentarily broke her hand free and raised it to shield her body from the blows. Her hand was broken. She couldn't use it. Her face, she was crying. She was full of tears. What if that happened to your daughter, your cousin, your relative, anybody, your grandchild?
So this is going on at a rate of every 20 seconds and every 4 minutes, to the point where children need emergency medical attention.
Buttocks was bleeding. A young woman being made to bleed on her buttocks. Her hand was broken. Painful. She couldn't use it. Her face, she was crying. She was full of tears. He then ordered her to go back to her studies in school. She couldn't even sit down. How could she sit down? He almost killed her. If he would have hit her in the head, he would have killed her.
CNN and our mainstream media is failing to report this. Black American boys make up less than 10% of the entire USA school population, yet they're receiving almost 50% of the beatings. Native Americans make up about 2%. They're receiving about 35% of the beatings. This is clearly an issue of
racial profiling.
You say it better than I do.
Racial profiling.
This sounds like a nightmare. Not a scene from a Texas public high school principal's office. One would expect a federal judge to consider diligently Jessica's claims that a brutal beating violated the Constitution.
This hierarchy: Black American boys, I'm sure that's no surprise, Black American girls, Latinos, Native Americans, poor white children, children having special needs, and according to the ACLU report, of August 2008 entitled A Violent Education, Children Deemed Openly Gay.
In court, the judge he dismissed the case on June 23, 2008. The United States Supreme Court once again looked the other way.
Many people are out there talking about trafficking, sex trafficking, and kidnapping, and all of these things happening to our children. It will not go away as long as U.S. tax dollars are paying American educators to take a wooden board like this and strike children in their care for gaining their obedience. That is not going to happen because this is done in the full view of our American people, public, private, and charter schools.
Because the kind of people that can torture somebody are not the kind of people you give authority to. That's why we don't believe in torture.
Wait, say that again about the room. If she
I said if I brought any of you, I mean, we're all that, right? You watch Jack Bauer, 24, you're all that. But if I actually put you in a freaking room and said, torture this man, you'd probably break down in tears and want to be tortured instead. Do me. I don't want to torture somebody. Go ahead and torture me instead. Okay? It's hard to do that. It's like killing people. Everybody watches TV, oh, killing's easy. The kind of people that don't have it in them to have a check on themselves. A person that could torture another human being, that's not somebody we give authority to because they're not going to make a good call ever. And that's why we don't believe in torture. When you give teachers that paddle and have them beat kids, I'm telling you right now, the kind of person that would take that paddle and beat a kid ain't a dude you give authority to.
This gentleman right here, do not take this serious. I'm sure if it had been his son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter, that he would have had a different view and it would not happen. But because he is a Caucasian, because he's of an affluent neighborhood, they're afraid to touch their children because they have access to lawyers.
Exactly.
And that's the whole problem with this country. The wealthy people, the 15% of the people in the United States, corporations and wealthy, control 99% of our lawyers, and everybody else gets robbed.
Just the mere fact that that wooden board in your hand is allowed to be in a school that any American child may attend, that is in the principal's office or that is in the teacher's office. What impact does this wooden board have on the entire school by just being there?
Well, I would imagine that just the fact that this is being used in the school would impact more than just the children that it's used on. I would think that it would be kind of like a virus that would go throughout the student body, and I think it would really have a huge impact psychologically on the kids, whether they were subject to actually being beaten with this, or whether it was their friend that was beaten with it, whether there's somebody that they didn't like that was beaten with it. I can just imagine the kind of environment that you're creating in a classroom and in a school, knowing that children are being separated and taken to the principal's office and then being beaten with this stick and then returned back to the school.
This man is the U.S. Education Committee chairman, and I would like you to turn this around so they can see that at the present time we actually have a U.S. federal bill. It's called Ending Corporal Punishment in Schools Act, H.R. 3027. And John Klein, the chairman of this committee for the entire USA schools, leads the #1 state. Minnesota is the #1 state. You can see it is green. Minnesota is green because if a teacher takes this wooden board into a classroom and strikes a school child, she will go to jail. But that same man is allowing it to happen in these states that are all red. And this bill was introduced September 22nd, 2011 by New York Representative Carolyn McCarthy. And if it fails, it will have failed for a second time. And our children will not only continue to be abused, but the harm and the level of abuse is ever increasing.
I think like humbleness before God is really a good thing, but I think humiliation between men, between children, between people. I think humiliation is just another form of slavery. I really find something like this egregious. Now, it's interesting to me because I've looked into cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment, and I know that when they make a decision on how they're going to define whether something is unusual and cruel as far as punishment goes in regard to criminal malfeasance, they tie the criminal sanction to the criminal malfeasance. So in other words, if somebody stole the loaf of bread, giving them the death penalty would be completely egregious. But if somebody killed everybody, a murder one charge would be reasonable, solitary confinement if they were fighting with inmates, things like that. It's the punishment is always tied to the malfeasance.
Not one mainstream media has reported this bill to date. The only time it was announced on on CNN was when it was introduced September 22nd, 2011.
If you use this in those 19 states in the prison system, and you hit inmates with this, if they issued these to COs right now, today, in the 19 states, and those COs use this on an inmate, I don't care what he did, they would be taken to court, they would be sued, and they would lose that lawsuit.
Well, Paula, thank you for being here. We hope we can help you and assist you in getting the message out. And our prayers with you and your family and these children who are being abused. And maybe Mr. Klein will get the message.
He must get the message, and he will get it when American people come together and say it is not okay for this deadly weapon deemed by our U.S. Supreme Court Justice to be used on defenseless school children, like I said, from 3 years old through 18, senior year in high school. 18 years old.
I thank you very much for being with us, and God bless, and we have a safe journey.
Thank you very much.
This would be deemed cruel and unusual punishment in any circumstance, no matter who the inmate was and what he did. This is the kind of thing they've taken out of prisons. So it's inappropriate to use this on an inmate in a prison who has committed a crime and been convicted for it, and perhaps even has committed a malfeasance in the jail. And yet, they can bring it into the schools and use it on children. So I just think the dichotomy between what we say we believe in, what we say we stand for. We go to other countries and we tell them this is what democracy is and force it on them. We tell them this is what you will do. You can wear this, you can wear that, you can do this. This is what democracy is. And yet at home, do we have democracy at home? Do we have justice? Do we have fair play? Do we have compassion? Do we have mercy on our own children? So I think if we're going to be teaching people something, the best way we can teach people something is to do it ourselves. Rather than telling people things, we should do it ourselves. And I think one of the big steps America could make in developing the youth so that they can become good people and good leaders and good participants in society would be to remove this from the classroom, from the schools, and remove the impact it would have on all the student body, regardless of whether they've actually been hit with this or whether it's just present and they know somebody has been taken out and hit with this and then returned to their classes. So I just think that if we're going to be a fair and just and humane society, this has got to go. This has got to stop. It's nonsense. We wouldn't do it to inmates. We certainly shouldn't be doing it to kids. Bottom line.
All right. The top 10 beating states, and right next to it I have a map of the top 10 lynching states. They're almost identical. Also, when you look at the states where corporal punishment is allowed and where it is most heavily practiced, those states are from the Deep South, from the old Confederacy. So the correlation that you suggest is, in fact, real.
Are those the same states that have the highest, would you say, the highest crime? Are their academic scores high or low? Are there any other similarities?
Well, their academic scores are low and their dropout rates are high.
Oh.
Nobody wants to be in a place where they can be beaten.
I see.
So the student who is living in that kind of environment is waiting for the day when he or she can get out of it.
I see. Our U.S. Education Committee Chairman John Klein. He leads in Minnesota, the #1 state for academic and social success. And the teachers there are prohibited from striking American school children, yet he is allowing it in these 19 states. If you were able to say a few words to Chairman John Klein, words of advice, what would you say to him?
Do the right thing. Open your mouth speak loudly, speak clearly, don't hide, don't conceal it. You're behaving correctly in your state, but announce that that's how it should be in the entire country. Don't keep it a secret, and do the right thing. Don't postpone it for another session of Congress to have to deal with it in the future. This should have been dealt with a long time ago. So now is the time to act.